The Astoria Grand Ballroom in Chicago, Illinois shimmered beneath an expanse of dazzling chandeliers, their cascading light refracting across polished silverware and pristine glassware. The room itself was an opulent display of wealth and influence, where conversations were whispered behind crystalline champagne flutes, and every movement carried the air of quiet, effortless power. Tonight was the annual Hope Foundation Gala, a night dedicated to raising funds for underprivileged youth. But despite the noble cause, there was an undercurrent of tension woven into the atmosphere, an unspoken awareness that the evening's keynote speaker had yet to take the stage. Seated near the back, where he preferred to remain out of the spotlight, Barron Trump observed the room with an expression of detached calm. At 18, he was already a striking presence. Towering over most men in the room, his broad shoulders and quiet intensity gave him an air of quiet dominance, an undeniable weight that made him seem far older than his years. Unlike the other attendees, who relished the attention, the flashing cameras, the whispered conversations with reporters, he had no desire for fame. He was here out of courtesy. A family friend, a longtime supporter of the Hope Foundation, had invited him. He had accepted politely, but he had no intention of standing out. The last thing he expected was to become the center of the night's most explosive moment. And then, the journalist took the stage. The evening had been progressing smoothly, the way these events always did. The string quartet played softly, a delicate undercurrent of sound that blended seamlessly with the clinking of wine glasses and the low hum of refined conversation. Waitstaff moved with practiced grace, refilling glasses, offering hors d'oeuvres, their presence as seamless as the decor itself. But the energy in the room shifted the moment Elliot Grayson was introduced. A round of polite applause greeted him as he strode onto the stage, his tailored navy suit impeccable, his smirk unmistakable. A professional provocateur, Elliot had built his entire career on sharp wit, cutting satire, and relentless critiques of the powerful. And in recent years, no last name had been a bigger target of his brand of mockery than Trump. Tonight would be no exception. Thank you, Elliot began, his voice smooth, laced with practiced charm. He adjusted the microphone, glancing over the audience with a smirk that promised trouble. It's always an honor to be at an event supporting our future leaders, especially those who weren't born into golden towers. The first jab landed lightly, subtle enough to be played off as humor, veiled enough to be denied as intentional provocation. A few chuckles rippled through the audience, but not everyone laughed. Some guests shifted in their seats. Others cast cautious glances across the room. From his table near the back, Barron Trump did not move. Elliot continued, weaving together his signature blend of political satire, cultural critique, and the kind of light-hearted barbs that wealthy elites had long learned to tolerate at events like these. But then, the tone of his voice changed. Now, of course, Elliot continued, we can't talk about privilege without mentioning a certain former president's son. The shift was instantaneous. The laughter died. A pause stretched through the ballroom, thin and taut as a wire, and in that single second, Barron felt the attention of every single person in the room turn toward him. He remained still, motionless. Elliot smirked, taking in the tension with undisguised satisfaction. He enjoyed this. I mean, he mused, his tone light, casual, deliberately flippant. Imagine growing up in a penthouse where even the doorknobs are probably worth more than most people's homes. A few nervous chuckles broke the silence, scattered, uncomfortable, uncertain. Many guests, however, remained utterly silent, their expressions betraying their unease. Elliot's smirk widened. Must have been tough, he continued. Waking up every morning surrounded by gold-plated ceilings, huh? Another pause. Longer, heavier this time. The energy in the room was shifting. This was not lighthearted anymore. This was targeted, personal. And yet, Barron Trump did not move. Elliot expected a reaction, an awkward laugh, a dismissive shake of the head, some kind of response, anything that would allow him to double down, to provoke, to push the moment into something even bigger. But Barron just sat there, unmoved, unshaken, unbothered. His blue eyes, cold, piercing, stared straight ahead, offering nothing. No flicker of embarrassment, no shift in posture, no tightening of the jaw, no nervous glance, no break in his composure, just stillness, unflinching. As if Elliot's words had never touched him. The second it happened, the energy in the ballroom shifted. Even those in the crowd who had initially laughed, the ones who had smirked, who had glanced at each other as if indulging in a shared joke, now fell silent. The weight of the moment pressed down on the room, suffocating, tangible, like the air itself had grown too heavy to move through. For the first time that evening, Elliot Grayson faltered. His confidence wavered. His smirk, so carefully curated, so effortlessly worn, slipped just slightly. He shifted behind the podium. He had miscalculated. Then, slowly, deliberately, with the composure of a man twice his age, the soft scrape of his chair against the polished floor was the only sound in the room. Every eye followed him as he stood, unrushed, unshaken, his tall frame commanding without needing to demand anything at all. And then, Barron walked toward the stage. Elliot swallowed. This was not what he had expected. He had anticipated a reaction, perhaps a laugh, a dismissive shrug, even a verbal sparring match that he could twist into another moment of entertainment. But this was different. Barron stopped at the very edge of the stage. From this close, his height, his sheer presence was undeniable. The tension in the room tightened, waiting. And then, in a voice steady, calm, unwavering, he spoke. "Thank you for your insight." The words were not what anyone had expected. They were measured, deliberate, not angry, not defensive, just calm. Elliot blinked. A moment's hesitation. From this close, his height, his sheer presence was undeniable. The tension in the room tightened, waiting. And then, in a voice steady, calm, unwavering, he spoke. "Thank you for your insight." The words were not what anyone had expected. They were measured, deliberate, not angry, not defensive, just calm. Elliot blinked. A moment's hesitation. Not the kind of silence that came from boredom, the kind that came from realization. "I get it," Barron said, tilting his head slightly, his voice still even, controlled. "It's easy to turn people into punchlines when you've never had to stand in their shoes." He let the thought breathe. "But here's something people forget." He paused. "Behind every headline, behind every joke, there's a real person, with struggles, with a story, with a life that no one actually knows except the one living it." The weight of his words settled over the room. The chandeliers still glowed. The string quartet still held their instruments. But the energy in the Astoria Grand Ballroom had shifted into something else entirely. Even Elliot looked uneasy now. The smirk was gone, replaced with something else, something he hadn't planned for. And then, the weight of his words settled over the room. The chandeliers still glowed. The string quartet still held their instruments. But the energy in the Astoria Grand Ballroom had shifted into something else entirely. Even Elliot looked uneasy now. The smirk was gone, replaced with something else, something he hadn't planned for. And then, not polite applause, not the hesitant, obligatory kind, but the kind that shook the very walls of the ballroom. Even those who had laughed at Elliot's jokes earlier now stood, some out of admiration, some out of pure, stunned respect. It wasn't just applause anymore. It was a statement, a recognition of something undeniable. The sheer weight of what had just happened still hung in the air, pressing down on the room like a moment too powerful to move past too quickly. Up on the stage, Elliot Grayson stood frozen behind the podium. His confidence, his carefully rehearsed charm, his effortless smirk, the swagger of a man who thrived on controversy, was gone, shattered. He had walked into this moment expecting an easy win, a joke that would land, a headline that would go viral. Instead, he had walked straight into one of the most defining moments of the night, and Barron Trump had owned it completely. No shouting, no theatrics, just composure, dignity, an undeniable presence that had silenced an entire room and turned the narrative on its head. And within hours, the world was watching. Clips of the exchange flooded social media, spreading like wildfire across Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Barron Trump just gave a masterclass in composure. This is how you shut down hate with dignity. Even major news outlets picked up the moment, calling it one of the most powerful clapbacks in years. Debates erupted, think pieces were written. Some called it the moment that redefined him. Others saw it as a warning that Barron Trump was not just a name, but a force. And yet, while the world dissected the moment, while commentators and analysts spun their takes, while social media roared with praise and speculation, Barron Trump simply returned to his seat. No victory lap, no need to revel in the moment, because for him, he had already said everything he needed to say, and he had let the world figure out the rest. This wasn't just a speech, it was a masterclass in grace, restraint, and quiet power. What do you think of Barron's response? Have you ever seen someone turn an attack into a defining moment of strength? Have you ever been in a similar situation where you had to choose between reacting or rising above? Let's discuss in the comments. If you respect composure, dignity, and the power of words, hit subscribe now. Don't miss more stories that redefine the narrative.